Chapter 10. The Secret of the Jungle. The church back home finally got through on the satellite mobile phone to inform the team that the missionary doctor would be arriving in a few days. John, Susan, and the rest of the team were relieved to hear this news, and they began to prepare for the doctor's arrival. David, however, had other plans. As soon as he heard the news, he volunteered to head back to the airport to pick up the doctor and bring them to the village. He told the others that he wanted to make sure that everything was set up for the doctor's arrival, and that they had everything they needed. But in reality, David had another motive. He wanted to leave earlier than he needed to, and head back to the lost temple to keep searching for treasure. He knew that he had to be careful, and he didn't want to reveal his true intentions to the others. He was determined to find the treasure, and he didn't want anyone to stand in his way. David packed his travel bag, including his phone, extra cash, clothes, and food. In the side pockets he added a flask and a can of near-empty deodorant which wasn't able to be stuffed in the main section. At least it would remind him to find more near the airport, or at the airport, and left at first light for the jungle, even before the others had woken up. He was eager to get back to the lost temple and continue his search for treasure. He knew that time was running out, and he didn't want to waste any more time. He also knew that the others might try to stop him, so he decided to leave early in the morning, when they were still asleep. David's journey through the jungle was like a never-ending maze, as he weaved his way through thickets of thorny bushes and twisted vines. The dense canopy of leaves above him was like a green ceiling, blocking out most of the sunlight. He trudged through the mud, his feet sinking with each step like anchors in quicksand. The humidity was thick like a blanket suffocating him. But as he drew closer to the temple, he could feel his heart beating faster with anticipation. The ancient structure loomed in front of him like a giant, silent sentinel, guarded by the thick jungle. He felt like an explorer uncovering a long-forgotten treasure. As he entered the temple, the musty air enveloped him like a cloak, and the darkness inside was as deep as the abyss. He felt like he was once again delving into the depths of history, uncovering secrets that had been buried for centuries. As David made his way deeper into the temple, he once again kept turning around every few steps and looking around for potential eyes. Nothing. Every time nothing. Yet still, I wonder. The thing that he thought had been following him before, he did not feel its presence anymore, but the world around him was still too quiet, too still. He knew that he had to be careful. He returned to carefully and quietly scouring the foreign symbols on the walls, looking for any secret chamber. He was like a detective, piecing together clues in a puzzle. He was determined to find the treasure, and he was willing to spend hours studying the symbols on the walls, searching for any hidden meaning. He was careful to avoid the dark passage with the human bones, knowing that it was a dangerous path that he didn't want to take. He knew that he had to be patient and persistent, and that the treasure would reveal itself in due time. As David continued his search, strange thoughts started to creep into his mind. They whispered to him that the treasure he was seeking would be truly marvelous, something beyond his wildest dreams. He couldn't shake off the feeling that these thoughts were not his own, but he didn't question where they came from. He was too focused on finding the treasure to stop and think about the source of these thoughts. He found himself becoming more and more obsessed with finding the treasure, the thoughts of it consuming him. He was willing to take risks, to ignore the danger, and to push himself to the limit. He didn't stop to think about the consequences of his actions, or about the fact that the thoughts in his mind might not be his own. He was caught up in the thrill of the hunt, and he couldn't let go. As David scanned the temple walls, his eyes fell on a strange symbol that seemed out of place among the other foreign symbols. It was a twisted knot of lines, etched deeply into the stone, and it seemed to glow with an otherworldly energy. He couldn't explain why, but he felt compelled to follow it. He traced the symbol with his fingers, and as he did, a section of the wall seemed to shift and move. David couldn't believe his eyes as a hidden chamber was revealed, the symbol acting like a key. He stepped inside and found himself in a room filled with treasures. Glittering gold and jewels were everywhere. The walls were covered with intricate carvings and ancient texts, some of them written in languages he couldn't understand. He felt like he had stumbled upon a lost civilization. David couldn't believe his luck. The symbol on the wall had led him to this hidden chamber, and it was filled with more treasure than he could have ever imagined. He couldn't wait to show the others, and he knew that this discovery would change everything. As David gazed at the treasures in the hidden chamber, a strange thought entered his mind, whispering to him not to share it. "It's yours. All yours." He didn't know where the thought came from, but it felt like it was coming from somewhere deep within him. "It is for you alone. You found it. You risked your life for it. Nobody else bothered." David imagined telling the others, "No. If you share it, it will be taken away from you. Don't you see that?" David couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The thoughts in his mind were not his own. He knew that he should share the discovery with the others, but the voice in his head was insistent, and it was hard to ignore. He felt a sudden urge to keep the discovery a secret, to keep the treasure for himself. He knew that it was not the right thing to do, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of possessiveness towards the treasure. David couldn't shake off the feeling that something was calling him back to the dark passage with the human bones. Despite his initial fears, his curiosity and need for adventure overcame his common sense. He decided to explore the tunnel once more, but this time, he was better prepared. He had brought a small weapon, a handgun that he had purchased from the shops near the airport. David made his way down the dark passage, the only light coming from his flashlight. He felt a sense of unease as he walked deeper into the tunnel, but he pushed on. As he went further, he could hear strange noises coming from the darkness ahead. He couldn't make out what it was, but it sounded like crunch, 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 the crunching of bones. David's heart was pounding as he approached a bend in the tunnel. He knew that whatever was making the noises was just around the corner, and he was ready for it. He held the gun tightly in his hand, and prepared to face whatever was waiting for him. As he turned the corner, he found himself face to face with something massive, but it was too dark to see exactly what it was. He heard it roar, and David fired his weapon in sudden fear, but it was unfazed and charged towards him, riled in anger. David realized that his weapon was useless, and started to run back the way he came. He didn't stop running until he reached the end of the tunnel. He was panting and trembling, but he was alive. He returned to the hidden treasure chamber, hoping the thing wouldn't know the way in. David sat there in the hidden treasure chamber, listening to the creature's movements and the strange language it spoke. He couldn't understand what it was saying, but he could sense a great deal of evil emanating from the creature. The language was unfamiliar to him, but it sounded like it was coming from something very large. He felt a sense of dread and fear creeping over him as he realized the true nature of the creature. David began to wonder if the creature was truly a Nephilim, as described in the Old Testament, an offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. It was the only thing that could explain its demonic presence, giant stature, and ability to speak. It all seemed to fit together, and David couldn't shake off the feeling that he was in grave danger. David knew he had to tell the others about the creature and the hidden treasure chamber. He knew that the creature needed to be stopped, and the treasure could be used for the good of the village. But at the same time, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he should keep the discovery a secret. He felt torn between his duty and his fear. "I need to pray. I need guidance. I need protection. I need help making this decision." David sat there in the hidden treasure chamber, waiting for an answer to his prayer. He could feel the weight of the silence, and knew that something was off. He knew that he was not receiving an answer to his prayer, and it made him uneasy. As he sat there, he couldn't help but wonder why he wasn't receiving an answer. Was it because he was not truly listening? Or was it because his greed for treasure was clouding his judgment? He knew deep down that his greed was stopping him from truly listening to what God had to say. David shook off these thoughts and ignored them, determined to do what he wanted. He told himself that there was still time to get back to the airport, and imagined that he had left earlier than he actually had. He tried to leave the chamber, but as soon as he opened the door, he was met with a terrifying sight. The creature had been waiting for him in silence. David felt a large, thick, warm hand closer over him. His legs were dragging on the ground, back down the dark tunnel. David screamed for help, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness and muffled by this strange human-like skin. For a moment it dropped him, but like lightning, he could feel the cold, clammy hand of the creature snag his ankle instead, pulling him deeper into the tunnel. He could hear the sound of its breathing, heavy and ragged, as it dragged him further and further away from the safety of the chamber. David remembered the old man's warnings. He remembered the animist priest's vicious smile. "The temple eat you before you get what you want." David knew that he had made a terrible mistake by ignoring his prayers and succumbing to his greed. He realized that he had put his own desires above the safety and well-being of himself and his team. "Forgive me, O God! Mercy!" It seemed to him that his prayers were not being heard. They lashed out into the darkness. He could only hope that someone would come looking for him before it was too late. Back in the village, as soon as John woke up and discovered that David had left, he was overcome with an urgency to pray for his safety. He knew that David had a tendency to act impulsively and put himself in danger, and he feared that this time may be no different. He immediately gathered the team, and together they prayed for God's protection over David, that he would guide him and keep him safe on his journey back to the airport. John couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. He felt a deep sense of unease and knew that he needed to keep praying for David's safety. He knew that they were not just dealing with physical obstacles on this mission, but also spiritual ones. He reminded the team that they needed to keep their focus on the mission and to keep their faith in God strong. They also prayed for continuing wisdom in how to deal with the animist priest and his followers. They knew that they were facing a spiritual battle and that they needed to be strong in their faith. They asked for the guidance of the Holy Spirit and for the protection of the angels. They knew that with God on their side, they could overcome any obstacle that came their way.